Hey, did you see this news coming out of Turkey about the earthquake near Istanbul?
I did, yeah. Quite a shakeup over there.
Buildings were shaking. Apparently, people ran out into the streets. Sounds pretty dramatic.
It really does. The report said the main tremor, the big one, hit around 12.49 local time. That's about 09.49 GMT Wednesday morning.
And it wasn't super deep either, was it? Something like less than 7 kilometers?
Exactly, 6.92 kilometers or 4.3 miles. And you're right, that shallow depth, it often means the shaking on the surface feels much stronger.
Right. Makes sense. And the location. It wasn't right under Istanbul city center.
No, the epicenter was out in the Sea of Marmara, near a town called Silivri, which is maybe 80 kilometers or so west of Istanbul, right along the coast there.
Okay, so 50 miles west, still close enough to cause a major stir in a huge city like Istanbul.
Absolutely. Close enough to rattle buildings significantly.
The initial reports, thankfully, didn't mention casualties or, widespread building collapses. That's the good news, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a relief. But officials in Istanbul are, quite rightly, being very cautious. They're out checking buildings, advising people to stay away from any structures that look damaged or unstable.
Understandable. Everyone's probably a bit on edge.
You bet. Especially after, recent history.
Yeah, exactly. And look, if you've ever felt an earthquake, even a small one, or if you have family or friends in that region, this kind of news just hits differently, doesn't it?
It really does. You immediately think about the people there.
So what we want to do today is sort of unpack this event. We'll use this BBC News report as our guide, look at the details of this specific earthquake, its significance for Istanbul, and maybe touch on some other related earthquake activity mentioned.
Sounds good. Let's dig in.
Okay, so the magnitude, 6.2. How significant is that really?
Well, a 6.2 is definitely a strong earthquake. It's not one of those minor tremors you barely notice. This is capable of causing serious damage, especially in areas with vulnerable buildings.
And being so close to Istanbul, a massive city, the impact must have been quite widespread.
For sure. The report mentioned people feeling intense shaking, seeing furniture fall over, lamps crashing down. That paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. And apparently residents were saying it's one of the strongest quakes they'd felt in years. In Turkey, that's saying something.
That really underscores the intensity. And there wasn't just the one tremor, right?
No, the report mentioned 2 other smaller quakes around the same time, and also aftershocks being recorded afterwards.
So, a sequence of events, not just an isolated jolt. That sometimes makes people even more nervous, wondering if there's more to come.
Yeah, that uncertainty. It must be unsettling. The report actually included a personal account, which I thought was quite powerful.
Oh, yeah.
From Selva Demiralp. She's an economics professor. She was in a high-rise building with her family when it hit.
Well, okay.
She described it as quite scary, which you'd expect, but also talked about finding this deep sense of comfort, just being together with her family through it.
That's very human, isn't it? Captures that mix of fear and connection.
Totally. But then she also mentioned feeling nervous, wondering if this quake was maybe a foreshock, a warning sign before something even bigger.
Right. That's a very common fear in seismically active regions after a strong quake. That lingering question.
Yeah.
Is this it, or is this just the prelude?
Which brings us to the bigger context here. It's impossible not to think about what happened in southern Turkey just last year.
Absolutely. Those devastating earthquakes in 2023. Over 55,000 lives lost. That tragedy is still very fresh in everyone's memory. It highlights the immense risk Turkey faces.
And Istanbul's specific location plays a huge role in that risk.
It does. The report points out it's only about 20 kilometers, maybe 12 miles, north of the North Anatolian fault line.
Okay, so for people listening who aren't geologists, what's the big deal about that fault line?
Well, think of the Earth's crust as broken pieces, tectonic plates. Fault lines are the boundaries where these plates meet and move against each other.
Right.
The North Anatolian Fault is a major boundary, similar in some ways to the San Andreas Fault in California. It's where the Anatolian Plate is grinding westward past the Eurasian Plate.
So lots of friction, lots of pressure building up.
Exactly. And that pressure gets released periodically as earthquakes. This fault line has a history of producing very large, very destructive earthquakes. So Istanbul's proximity, it's a constant concern.
A major source of seismic activity right on the doorstep of a megacity.
Precisely. That combination is what makes seismologists particularly watchful of this region.
Now, the report also briefly touches on a couple of other recent earthquakes, just to give some perspective.
I saw that.
There was one in California near San Diego. A 5.2 magnitude hit on Monday.
Okay, a moderate one.
Yeah, and thankfully, no reports of injuries or major damage there.
It's interesting, isn't it, how quakes of similar or even lesser magnitude can have vastly different impacts depending on location, depth, building standards.
Definitely. A 5.2 in California, with their building codes, might just rattle some shelves. But a quake doesn't even need to be that much stronger in a different setting to be catastrophic.
It really highlights the importance of infrastructure and preparedness alongside the raw power of the quake itself.
The report also mentioned the ongoing situation in Myanmar after a recent earthquake there.
Ah, yes, a much more tragic situation, sadly.
Yeah, over 3,000 confirmed dead, and the UN reporting continued fighting despite ceasefires, complicating relief efforts, UK charities launching appeals. It's just awful.
It's a brutal reminder that the earthquake itself is often just the beginning. The aftermath, especially in regions facing conflict or other challenges, can be incredibly difficult and long-lasting.
A natural disaster layering onto a human crisis.
Exactly. Makes recovery so much harder.
And then, shifting gears completely, there was this one fascinating, almost random detail in the report about elephants.
Elephants, what about them?
Apparently, during earthquakes, they exhibit this behavior where they huddle together in an alert circle, facing outwards, to protect the calves in the middle.
Huh. Really? That's
Yeah.
amazing. Like a defensive formation.
Yeah. It's just one of those surprising little insights into how different species react to these massive geological events. Nature's own preparedness plan, maybe?
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Shows how seismic events impact the entire ecosystem, not just us humans and our buildings. A primal instinct for protection.
So let's try and pull this all together. We've looked at this specific Istanbul quake, the context.
Great.
What are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think first, this 6.2 quake was a significant event. Felt strongly due to its shallow depth near a major city. While immediate reports didn't show mass casualties, the potential was there, and the concern is real.
Right. And the personal stories, like the professors, really ground the experience in human terms, the fear, but also finding connection.
Definitely. And then there's the crucial context. Istanbul's position near the very active North Anatolian fault line, and the stark reminder from last year's devastating quakes in the south. It all points to a persistent, high level of seismic risk.
And it serves as a reminder for all of us, really, wherever we live, about the power of nature and the importance of preparedness in vulnerable zones. These aren't just local news stories, they're part of a global reality.
Absolutely. Living on a dynamic planet.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps. Given Istanbul's history, its location, and the ever-present seismic threat, what does an event like this signal for the future?
That's the big question, isn't it? What does the possibility of aftershocks or future, perhaps larger events, mean for long-term planning? How do you build resilience in a city that's so ancient, so densely populated, and sitting right next to such a powerful fault line?
Yeah. It's not just about reacting to this quake, but about the continuous challenge of living with that risk. What kind of long-term strategies are needed?
It requires constant vigilance, investment in infrastructure, public education. It's a huge undertaking.
Definitely something to ponder. And if this discussion sparked your curiosity, maybe look into the North Anatolian fault lines some more, or even check out earthquake preparedness resources for your own area. It's always good to be informed.
Good advice.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.